Missouri gets a big-name Georgia player out of the transfer portal, plus more drama surrounding Ryan Wingo. Well, that was a pretty on-brand moment today. Let's talk about it and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As I struggle to bring up the graphic, make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And I think I'll get started with the news of the day here as Darus Smith is transferring from the University of Georgia to the Tigers. Now, I've talked about Darus Smith here for the last few days or so. One thing I do want to clarify here at the top, I've been calling Smith a linebacker, which was accurate in Georgia's 3-4 scheme with 3 down linemen and 4 linebackers. But for all intents and purposes, Smith was an edge rusher at Georgia and almost certainly will be one at Missouri as well, except this time it will be as a 4-3 defensive end instead of a 3-4 linebacker. But again, mostly a pass rusher, it looks like, is what Darus Smith is going to be for the Tigers. With the Bulldogs last year, he played sparingly with just 3 tackles, but despite that was a top 100, top 150 type of recruit, depending on where you look at his high school rankings. But, of course, as a lot of people find, tough to crack the depth chart as a young player on the Georgia Bulldogs defense. But, again, despite his relatively paltry stats and playing time in 2023, still plenty of programs wanted him for 2024, including, of course, Missouri, Tennessee, Auburn, and North Carolina, among others, were very interested in this young man. So will this guy be an immediate, definite starter? He'll definitely be in contention. He'll be in competition for a starting gig. No question about that. But again, a guy who doesn't have a lot of playing time so far in his college career. Listen, high school stats are nice. He's still going to have to prove it on the field at the college level. Now, you may remember earlier in this past fall when Ryan Wingo, the big-time St. Louis area wide receiver, 5-star high school prospect, well, the scuttlebutt around just basically everyone reporting on recruiting these days was that Wingo was a big-time lean toward Missouri. All of the Rivals.com future casts were pointed that way and what have you. But, of course, at the 11th hour, Wingo decides to go to Texas. Or so it would seem. Perhaps we don't know what happened behind the scenes, at least those of us who are honest with ourselves. A lot of people think they know what happened behind the scenes. So, I don't know, perhaps Wingo always knew that he was going to go to Texas and use Missouri for leverage. Who the heck knows? This type of thing happens with coaches and general managers at the pro level and all types of things. So it shouldn't be a gigantic shock unless we're really naive that suddenly athletes who have a lot of negotiating power would use this type of thing to their advantage. And while we as Missouri fans may not love it, honestly, it's a tough thing to complain about. But it was kind of amusing this morning when Ryan Wingo's official announcement, I suppose his official I don't know, faxing of his national letter of intent. Do people still use fax machines for this, or have we moved on to some type of iPhone app at this point? But regardless, Wingo supposedly at one point had slept through when he was going, had slept a little bit late. He says, hey, I'm up, LOL, blah, blah, blah. The point is, a lot of Missouri fans were starting to wonder, wait a second, we've kind of seen a similar movie to this before. Could there be an 11th hour switch back to the Tigers, or perhaps some other place in the country? Well, no. End of the day, Wingo ends up committing to the Texas Longhorns officially. So that whole saga we can now put behind us. I will say I was disappointed and actually dismayed seeing some people, fortunately not a lot, but a few apparent Missouri fans. By the way, these could always be trolls who are fans of other teams. You never know. I didn't scroll deeply into these people's profiles or history or anything like that. But just assuming that these are real Missouri fans that I happened upon here in Ryan Wingo's messages, again, let's just remind everybody that, first of all, let's treat other people like human beings and remind yourselves that, yes, these are high school kids at this point. I think just the idea of being bombarded with comments by strangers' comments on the internet constantly. Listen, I had to deal with some stuff when I was a high school basketball player at a much smaller level than what Ryan Wingo has had to deal with. But I'm just saying, if I could even read one or two negative comments about my game when I was, say, 17 or 18 years old, that would have caused me to go into a big time, spiral of negativity and depression, quite possibly. So let's just be nice to people online, whether they're athletes or they're just regular Joes and Janes like you and me. And also, just from a selfish perspective, from your own personal perspective, who the heck knows in the world of the transfer portal? Hey, remember when Caden Green didn't commit to Missouri and people were all mad at his family for supposedly, they just wanted him to go to Oklahoma or whatever the heck it was? Well, guess what? Things change, times change, people change their minds, and in the world of the transfer portal, guess who's back? It's Caden Green. And if you're one of the idiots online who was giving Caden Green crap a year ago, well, feel free to issue him a heartfelt apology at this very moment. And even more importantly, let's learn and not do that kind of despicable behavior in the future. Let's be true sons and daughters and actually live up to the whole thing of honor and duty. How about that? And coming up, Missouri signs a cornerback out of Nashville that, in my opinion, has all the hallmarks of a late bloomer. This guy could be a real diamond in the rough for Missouri in the coming year. So I want to talk about Jaren Sensabaugh here in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, well, there's absolutely no better time to get in on the action. I got to say, the action that is most surprising to me in the NFL right now is that Brock Purdy is by far and away your leader for MVP right now at -200. Lamar Jackson second at +500. My goodness, what are we doing here? Brock Purdy? Seriously? He's the best player in the league? Listen, I'm not even going to tell you Mahomes should deserve to win, but how about Christian McCaffrey over him? Give me a break on Brock Purdy. I just can't believe that's where the NFL is going at this point. But you know what? Here's where you should go. Again, FanDuel Sportsbook. They've got so many different betting options. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season in style. It's FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. That's Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. And as to that high-rising, hopefully, corner from Nashville, Jaren Sensabaugh, originally a commit to the home city there of the home university there, Vanderbilt. Again, I think he's a late bloomer because an injury forced him to miss his entire junior season of football. But after an impressive senior season, bigger offers like Missouri and the home state Tennessee Volunteers started coming in, and he definitely has the preferred SEC size at this point at the position these days, if that 6 foot tall mark can be believed. But again, I think the potential for a late bloomer here is big because that junior year is so big for recruiting these days. Most guys who are signing SEC offers are going to be doing so before their senior seasons, if not before or during their junior seasons. Oftentimes. That's why, the Courtney Crutchfield thing, I had somebody take me to task and say, hey, that wasn't surprising. I've known about it for weeks. Fair enough. The point I was trying to make here is that more often than not, 4-star guys like Courtney Crutchfield aren't playing out their senior season of high school football and then ultimately deciding where they play. It happens. It's just not the modus operandi or what usually happens more often these days. So the point is, Jaren Sensabaugh, a guy who Missouri almost certainly won't be counting on next season, but an interesting guy, hopefully, who will stick around for years to come and develop into hopefully a late bloomer that becomes a diamond in the rough. And my other point with Crutchfield yesterday is that really he was the only guy that there was much drama around at this point, because we pretty much knew, despite what, some people on the Oklahoma beat would have led us to believe, Williams Nwaneri was going to sign. We knew this. He told us this online a week, 2 weeks ago, just basically brushing off any concerns that he wasn't going to sign with the Tigers. So for him and the receiver James Madison, who's become a real popular figure from Florida, a big-time Missouri recruiter online, I would say at this point, and a big-time cheerleader for the Tigers. Again, he signed, no big surprises there. It seems like the McClellan kid from Florida, it seems like, I say the kid because I'm forgetting his first name. Forgive me off the top of my head here, but the defensive lineman, last name McClellan, Florida Gator, it seems like his commitment to somewhere is imminent. The Tigers may well be in the lead there. It sounded like Oklahoma and Colorado were the main competitors. So, who knows? Maybe even before the end of the show, I'll know something there. But it seems like his commitment is imminent. But in terms of surprises on the field, well, speaking of another McClellan, Jeremiah McClellan, no relation, I believe, another big-time prospect. Well, he had been committed to Ohio State and actually did flip, but he didn't flip to Missouri. He flipped to Oregon on National Signing Day. Again, early national signing period here in a somewhat surprising move because, Oregon, it's tough to imagine a guy who was going from St. Louis to Ohio State. Yeah, let's go thousands of miles away to Eugene until you realize, obviously, Oregon has an elite program. But not only that, you want to talk about name, image, and likeness as well as Missouri is doing there. Hard to imagine that essentially Nike is backing Oregon's name, image, and likeness stuff at this point. So that's one of the first, I'd say, signs of some real deep pockets there at Oregon, flipping Jeremiah McClellan from Ohio State over to the Ducks. And indeed, with Missouri playing its biggest bowl game in a decade, it's a little interesting that we're now, 13 minutes into the show here, and I haven't even brought up the Cotton Bowl. That kind of tells you where we are in college football in 2023-24 here. But you know what? As time goes along here, as I've sort of alluded to this week, as we get closer and closer to kickoff, and Marvin Harrison Jr., the great Ohio State wide receiver, is expected to be a top 5, certainly a top 10 pick in this coming NFL draft, where the closer we get to the game and he hasn't announced that he's opted out, you start thinking, gosh, maybe he's going to play in this ball game. And I think more people are thinking that way. Missouri's still favored, now down from 2.5 to 1.5. I've been saying for a week now just about that this game should probably be closer to a pick. If it was really opened, and it did, it opened Ohio State minus 6.5 over at FanDuel Sportsbook. That's a pretty extreme line movement for just Kyle McCord, for instance, the Ohio State quarterback. I just don't think he's worth 8 points, 9 points. I just don't think that's a realistic line movement. That should be a Caleb Williams type of player. A truly elite quarterback should only be moving the line that much. That's really nothing to do with a Missouri-Ohio State analysis. That's just my own experience as a odds-making analyst observer, if you will. I'm just telling you that's a really extreme line movement. Now, of course, Julian Fleming, another great Ohio State wide receiver, has opted out of the game. They have a running back that's opted out, and maybe one or two other semi-important players, but at the same time, I continue to think now maybe the line movement's gone a little bit too far, and this game may be a pick or so, and maybe even if Harrison Jr. plays, I think Ohio State could well be favored by kickoff of the Cotton Bowl. And again, more on the Cotton Bowl. As I said, as we get closer and closer to the game, I think the line just may get a little bit closer and closer to a pick as well. But also Brady Cook says as it gets closer, he says, I'm just smiling thinking about it. It's getting close and it's almost here. He also thought of an angle that I should have by now, which is that Mookie Cooper is, quote, fired up. We know this one's a little personal for Mook. He's gotten a taste of that side, so yeah, he's going to be fired up. He's going to be ready to go. So no doubt about that. Hopefully Mookie Cooper can have a nice productive game against his former team to cap off what's been a really nice season for the Tigers as well. He's been a really important and underrated piece of this Missouri offense this season. Time and time again, the guy just sort of managed to find himself open in key situations. So great work from Mookie Cooper, who stuck it out at Missouri, fought through some injuries and a tough start here, and maybe was passed by, obviously, by an even more notable St. Louis wide receiver in Luther Burden. So it was just nice to see him have a nice senior season. It really was. And by the way, Theo Weiss, I thought, kind of echoed something similar to what Brady Cook said about Kirby Moore, by the way. But here's what Theo Weiss, the Missouri receiver, said about Missouri offensive coordinator Kirby Moore. He said, he's a mastermind. He really puts in that work. I think he's coming up here like at 5 a.m., leaving at midnight or like 1, and that's every day. You can just tell how dedicated and how much time he's actually putting into the offense. I've learned a lot of little things, just like how to read certain coverages from being on the outside, how to read the safety, the linebacker, things like that, and actually expands my game. So, it just sounds like Kirby Moore. Brady Cook said the same thing. He's the guy who's just going to get up early. And, well, Brady said, I swear the guy watches every single college football game every Saturday. Now, obviously, that's a bit of an exaggeration by Cook, but I think maybe he watches the offenses, every snap they play of every single opponent that Missouri has. That I could actually believe. And even that is a massive amount of workflow, and just shows once again why Eli Drinkwitz, to me, made the obvious correct decision to hire an offensive coordinator. There's just no realistic way a head coach, when you have to be now in charge of recruiting and the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness funds to some extent, you just have so much more on your plate than you ever have, even when compared to when Drinkwitz took this job in 2020. The sport has changed so much, so dramatically in just a short period of time. To me, Drinkwitz had no choice but to hire an offensive coordinator. But fortunately, his actual choice seems like it was a really good one. Now, I've talked a decent bit about the planned North Endzone project at Faurot Field here in the coming years, but so far it's been mostly speculation. Well, a few days ago, we did get some details after Missouri put out a press release saying it had chosen an architect for this project and some other projects as well. So it sounds like this is a whole revamp here about a lot of things on campus at the athletic department, not just the North End Zone, but that certainly is the headliner here. So let's get to that here in just a little bit. But first, I want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Honestly, I could imagine in the transfer portal era that having something like LinkedIn Jobs to help you, honestly, I'm not even kidding here. If if the players would get on LinkedIn Jobs, post themselves as available, man, that would make the workflow for a lot of these coaches a heck of a lot easier, I've got to think. Well, LinkedIn Job isn't just another job board, by the way. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Many years ago now, coming off of 2 back-to-back SE East championships in 2013 and 14, well, that was about the worst time possible for a whole bunch of different things to happen to Missouri, because the Tigers, unfortunately, just were never able to fully capitalize on that incredible moment as they entered the SEC now nearly a decade ago. Well, over a decade ago they entered, but 14 less than a decade. You know what I'm saying here. But the point is, Missouri's recruiting classes in those years never fully capitalized for whatever reason on that success, the successes of 13 and 14. And unfortunately, well, Gary Pinkel obviously had some health troubles, had a cancer diagnosis, and chose to retire after 2015. And I won't even bother to go over the events of the protests from November of 2015 for the millionth time. But obviously that was not a positive event for the Missouri football program. But quite the opposite now. 23, as we head into 24, it seems like there's a whole bunch of different things that are happening at the same time in a positive way. The exact opposite, quite honestly. And quite honestly, Missouri then hires Kim Anderson, a little later in 2015 or late 2014, whatever it was. I forgive me for not knowing the exact year. It must have been 14, right? But anyway, the point is, the Kim Anderson thing, it never worked out, and just, yet another variable there that caused the Missouri Athletic Department to go to a really dark period for a few years there. But now, hey, it looks like Eli Drinkwitz has this thing turned around the right direction. 10-2, that's as much of a proof of concept as you're going to get. Dennis Gates, hey, year 2 hasn't been as good as year 1, but who in the heck could have expected year 1 to be as good as it has been? I think most sane Missouri fans are still well aboard the Dennis Gates bandwagon. And by golly, we found the best athletic director we've had in a long, long time as well. And this lady seems to be determined to take this athletic program to places it's never been before. And part of that is an actual build-out. The North Endzone complex, Missouri, again, chose an architect for this Memorial Stadium improvements project. A whole lot of words here in this press release. The most interesting part to me is this one paragraph I'll read to you really quickly here. It says, a new premium seating component is a core element in the university's vision for the Memorial Stadium improvement project, along with multiple open-air observation decks, a variety of improved and modernized food and beverage concessions, new restrooms, new stadium gateway and gate system, improving wayfinding and graphics, new retail outlets, new football team recruiting room, and the integration of the new enhanced North Endzone video board. The rock M behind the North Endzone will be preserved as part of the renovation. So again, to me, the most important part there, obviously a new premium seating component. Whenever I heard that, again, coming off years of Missouri not being particularly good in either of the big time two sports here, well, I've heard that there still is demand and a waiting list for new suites. That's all you need to know. Yep, if you build it, they will definitely come in this case. Apparently, there's plenty of demand for those premium suites in Memorial Stadium. So by all means, capture that revenue. Who could argue against that? Multiple open-air observation decks is an interesting concept, sort of like maybe the south end zone walking area, but obviously with more than one deck. And obviously, hey, retail outlets as well. That's something that's been, again, rumored. A lot of people have speculated about, but to see the idea of, hey, new retail outlets, what does that mean? Does that mean a Tiger team store? Yeah, probably. Does it mean a restaurant of some sort? Yeah, maybe. I think that's actually a pretty strong possibility to have maybe 24/7, not 24/7, but 365 all year round, meaning non-football game days and in the off season. You could have a premium restaurant to go have a nice bite to eat and look down into Faurot Field, something like that. I could definitely see that being a possibility. The video board is also obvious, and I think to all the people who are wringing their hands a little bit about the Rock M, never thought for a second that the Rock M was going anywhere, but you'll be happy to see the official word there that the Rock M will be preserved. So a decent amount of details there, actually, and I'm excited about the whole thing, obviously. And, you know, just the fact that the premium seating alone, to me, that alone is going to be worth it. If there's real demand for that, you got to go through with it. And the rest of it is kind of a bonus, really. And again, retail outlet shops, in theory, you're going to lease these things out, right? So even if the restaurant doesn't work, maybe something else will. Who the heck knows? So interesting revenue opportunities for Missouri there. Hopefully, I've been telling my buddy who hasn't been on campus for a long time, you'd be stunned what this stadium actually looks like south of Memorial Stadium these days. Well, hopefully the North End Zone has as cool of a renovation here in the coming years. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining me here today on Locked On Mizzou. As always, thanks for making it your first listen. And again, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. So until next time, I'm John Miller, and thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou.